In 1983, 38 IRA inmates broke out of the Maze prison, 10 miles from Belfast. It was the most audacious escape since Colditz. This is the story told by 3 of the leaders of the escape, and for the first time, a prison officer. The Maze was reputedly Europe's most secure jail, a prison within an army camp.
It's hard to explain the quite intimidating nature that was the H blocks. Sentries and sensors and alarms and cameras, and even the fact that the jail is situated more or less inside a British Army military camp.
Each wing is secure. Each leg of the H in the block is a secure unit. The block's a secure unit. Then that is also in a phase, which is also inside the prison camp, which is also inside a British Army camp. If you want to get out of that there, you have a series of things to do to go from point A to point B, and it's all designed as a hyper-secure unit.
There was this aura developing of, this was an impregnable fortress, the only way you get out of, jail. And in fact, of course, the British government and Maggie Thatcher were boasting about it. It was in a wooden box.
It was virtually impossible for any individual criminal to escape. But its designers hadn't accounted for a prison population who considered themselves an army.
The amount of prisoners who were doing huge sentences was phenomenal. So there were loads of life sentence prisoners, 20 to 30 year sentence prisoners. So in a sense, people had to focus on attempting to get out.
One of the duties of a political prisoner is to escape. It's like shooting for the stars. It's like something that you've always really wanted, And what I wanted to do was to not be released, but to escape. It's great to be released, but I wanted to break the system.
You just can't willy-nilly get up and start cutting holes in fences. Otherwise, the security apparatus is on top of you morning, noon and night. The camp staff decided that something needs to be done to coordinate this.
The camp escape officer who was appointed was Larry Marley. Immediately, he set about establishing an escape department. He wanted to create a collective ethos within the jail about an approach to escapes.
So they set about organising an escape officer in every block. They set about setting up an intelligence officer who was to bring in intelligence.
It's a very large camp. And when the screws would move you from one part of the jail to the other, they would move you in blocked out vans. They had a policy of providing you with the most limited view of the jail. Larry set about a plan to first of all demystify the jail. It was first of all getting the structure, where each block was in relation to each other block. Any aerial photographs that would have existed of the jail in the media would have been smuggled in from outside. There would have been ordnance survey maps smuggled in from outside with the view to developing an outside view of the jail. The intelligence gathering process, the most obvious aspect of it was prisoners moving about the jail. We then made ourselves available for work with the view to infiltrating the system. So prisoners were then working in the prison hospital, prison administration areas, the kitchen, going out on visits, coming back from visits. There was prisoners going out on parole, coming back from parole. Larry then had working with him a think tank, a wee core group, who would go through the information coming in from a central perspective.
He was also very innovative, and he used to encourage me when I would say about, look, I think we could do this and do that. He said, listen, you need to think big. Let's think big. Never mind 4 or 5 people. Why not 20, 25, 34? Why not 40? Why not 50? Think big. Always think big.
Just 18 months earlier, this most closed of worlds had become very public indeed, as the IRA made it a battleground with staff and the British government.
There can be no question of political status for someone who is serving a sentence for crime. Crime is crime is crime. It is not political, it is crime.
During the hunger strike I would say, was probably the most tense time in the prison. I mean, I, for one, didn't think that a prisoner would die on hunger strike. I thought when they were on hunger strike, they'd come to an agreement with the government, but I could not for life of me see the government letting somebody die. And it came as a shock when the first one died, and then that threw a blanket over the Maze prison. The atmosphere, and you could have cut it with a knife.
Screws didn't like us because the IRA on the outside had killed X amount of prison staff, and on a more face-to-face level, we didn't like Screws because by and large we had been the victims of their brutality.
There was huge anger. I would argue hatred. Some of the stuff that was done during the protest, I mean, people still talk about with great emotion.
The escape plan began with a radical move. The initial focus was not the prison or its structure. The first walls to scale were in the prison officers' minds.
Part of the change in tactics was to have a better, if that can be the term, certainly a more working relationship with the prison staff.
We sat down and we planned the approach to the Screws with regards to trying to create a friendly environment. Part of that was talking to Screws by their first names, arguing with them over calling us by our second names. I mean, if they said, story, visit, you say, "Man ahead, John, the name's Bobby, what are you shouting like that for?" And trying to create this sort of softness and taking the tension out of the climate.
It was crucial for the psychology that existed in the block to be brought to the level of not this hyper-security attitude that they had had.
We went through a difficult time on occasions getting Republican comrades to go out into the same environment, the Screws, and act in a way as if you were accepting the status quo. For instance, Bick McFarlane, who would be the OC of the hunger strike. How all of a sudden he could be out cleaning the bins.
This is a Republican prisoner, naked in a cell, who's taken on Maggie Thatcher. And then all of a sudden they have him brushing yards. And their attitude actually, strange enough, was in some of them, was they thought they'd broke us. Others, were a bit suspicious, but there was ones there who actually thought, oh, we've got these guys now.
When the Screws come down the wing, you'd actually stood helping them with a crossword. Or you'd have been bantering them about the football. It also then, when you're sitting down, you're making them tea and you're having toast, the conversations will move on to other things. Through conversation that way, you end up acquiring information as well. Just through a process, which is, it must be a nightmare queuing up to get out there. Nah, I know what I do, blah, blah, blah. It must take us an eternity getting off duty. There's 200 going out at the one time. No, but sure, we stagger it and this is what you do. And sure, I can go out and what I do is slip off early, and that PO lets me away 15 minutes early because, see, at such and such a time, that's when you get the big. So somebody's only after telling you that the worst time in the world to go through that gate there is at 3:45.
were that eager to see Republicans cleaning their floors and making their tea, they dropped a lot of their caution. And in the case of H7, which was crucial to the work that we would eventually do there, the Screws wanted us to go into the circle area, which was the nerve centre of each of the H blocks, and to clean and to polish their area.
It then became acceptable for me to be standing in the grills of the nerve centre of the block, which is their security control room, which is supposed to have the wooden door closed, the steel grill bolted and padlocked. It then became norm for that door to be open. They needed it open for fresh air because there was no ventilation. But it then became norm that they unpadlocked and just left the bar over. It became normal for me to be standing with my arms through that, talking to a screw, getting them a cup of tea, opening the grill, bringing them in tea and toast, closing it over again, walking away. Slowly but surely, it became the norm.
The prisoners manipulated the staff. That's the way they worked over probably a number of months. They weren't doing anything to benefit me or any of the staff. They were playing their own tune.
Through the strategy of interacting with prison staff, Republicans gleaned a vital piece of intelligence.
The transport coming in and out of the prison was always a focal point for transport getting you from point A to point B. It began to emerge that one of the biggest avenues that we can use was a prison food lorry. That travelled in and out of the camp, travelled in and out of every block, and quite frankly, I lost count of the number of times per day that lorry was travelling around the camp. It was just non-stop.
We also found out that it wasn't searched at any of the gates, and that it was very much its own authority as it drove about the jail. They also learned through intelligence gathering that it went outside the camp for screws who were doing what was popularly called homers, and that would be like moving furniture or just using the lorry for whatever reason they wanted to use it on a personal basis. But what it meant for us was that the screws who were dealing with the front gate, or the Brits on the front gate, would be used to seeing it going in and out, and that was a crucial piece of intelligence for us because that assisted our plan.
In theory, walls could be climbed over or tunnelled under. But what if the prisoners could simply drive out the front gate?
People get lazy, they don't want to do the checks, they get used to the faces, which is why the driver of the lorry became so crucial.
We then considered whether or not we had infiltrated the system of the jail enough to actually plan the takeover of a whole H block.
A block housed 4 self-contained prisons in the legs of the H, called wings. These were controlled by what was known as the circle within the bar of the H.
If you were to take over a block, you had to take it from the circle out. Because to take it in the wings, how would you get into the circle if there was any noise and all that? So you had to take it from the nerve centre out.
The H blocks were designed for individual control. They were not designed to deal with Republican prisoners of war who would organise and control and exploit the conditions that they would find themselves in. Anybody looking at a H block would see it as a nightmare scenario from the reverse, who would say, whoever gets control of the circle, and in the event that there's 120, 130 Republican prisoners here, controls the block.
We sat down in the block to look at all the different aspects, and then we were then charged locally in the block with the responsibility of putting the diagrams together, indicating the alarm points, how they would do point A, how they would take point B, how many people was required. It was meticulous. Some of the stuff was totally and absolutely meticulous because we needed to be able to sell the escape to the IRA outside. We had to be hyper cautious because it had to be written. There is no other way. There was no other way of selling an argument other than putting it in paper and handing it to somebody. So it was all done in miniature. It's a major operation that you're talking about doing, and it's no different from an IRA operation outside, that it's a need-to-know basis, and if you don't need to know, you don't know, even if you're going to be playing a part in it at a later stage.
Like you used to have a thing, loose lips sink ships during the war. Literally, there were some people who didn't know about the escape right up to the last minute.
And the underpinning security aspect of it was that if we found out that they had breathed a word to anybody by hint or innuendo or anything, they wouldn't be going. I mean, the risk factor in this was huge.
I would have recognised early on that if there was no firearms available for the escape, then the escape wasn't going to happen. We worked out that the screws would have had the weight of numbers over and above us out in the administration area, and that we would actually need pistols, firearms, for greater effect and greater influence over the screws.
You had to be able to take whoever you were taking and have them basically surrender immediately, because you couldn't afford any fisticuffs or anything like that. And the only way to do that was that they knew that they had no choice.
The army leadership on the outside recognised the escape plan as one that could work, and they cleared the operation and agreed to resource it.
With the IRA's agreement, what had until now been a paper exercise became reality. Guns were smuggled inside. 25 years on, the IRA will still not say how.
Now, once they agreed, that was sort of game on. That just lifted us from about 20% to about 60 or 70. You know, it just gives you that difference, that whole different attitude to it. And I remember Jerry saying to me that this is good stuff. This is looking really, really good.
So we knew we could take over a block. We knew we could secure the block without the alarm going out. We knew that the prison lorry would come at a particular time. We knew we could hijack the lorry. We knew we could hide in the back. We knew that the prison lorry would not be searched going through the jail to the Tally Lodge.
The reason we chose a Sunday was Sunday is a closed day. There's no visits, there's no movement inside the prison other than food lorries up and down or somebody going to hospital. There's no workshops, there's no football, there's nothing. Sunday is just, you observe Sunday like a religious day almost, even inside prison. Therefore, they do not also need the same amount of staff as they would on a normal working day. You're up on that day, there's a sense of apprehension about the day, and there's a sort of sense of something's on here.
I suppose in a personal sense I was going, you know, this is it. I had a number of attempted escapes, a number of them had failed. I knew that this was both complicated and dangerous. I knew that whatever happened, if I was caught at the far end of it, that it was going to increase the amount of time I was in jail fairly substantially. So it was a big decision.
The first job of work to be done that day was to pick McFarlane, who was the orderly. His job was to take the names of all the screws in the block, because we needed 12 uniforms and we needed to identify, knowing the prisoners who they were for, the screws that we would take them from for size and fit and stuff like that there.
One of the things that I had to identify was the control room, because it's crucial. And it was always the same 5 or 6 people who alternated that duty in the control centre. And out of the 5 or 6, there's only one of them that we felt would create any difficulty in a bad situation, and he's the one that was on. That day it was John Adams was on the control room, and I was chatting to him, oh, early start today, early away. No, I've took on a full duty today, and I went, Jesus Christ.
After months of winning the warders over with fake friendliness and tea and toast, It was time to reveal their true intentions. 38 men, a dozen with key duties, would launch an escape planned with military precision.
I went out, down the wing, out into the circle, overalls on, pistol down the belt.
Jerry Kelly followed him out a couple of minutes later from another wing. He also had a firearm. Tony McAllister followed him out, and Brendan Meade followed him out. All of those prisoners were armed with a pistol. Those were all prisoners who were orderlies in the general circle area or had reason to go in and out of it, and Screws were used to seeing them there. At the point that Bick decided the operation was ready to commence, he was to shout the word bumper.
And then Bobby Story, that was his way of getting out. He was going to bring the bumper out. Bumper is a floor polisher.
And then that was us on the move.
The bumper command signaled a 90-second countdown. In that time, Bobby Story and his team would have to silently capture 4 prison officers, all gathered in one room.
We talked about and practiced bringing a level of aggression to each of the moves in order to deter anybody from resisting us and to offset the likelihood of our having to use the firearms.
Use verbal aggression to put it across. You know, you make sure they know this is an IRA operation. You make sure that they know you will act if you have to, but you won't act if you don't have to.
And when I closed the door, there was 4 prison officers in the room. We produced our firearms. We had practiced going through the drama of very dramatically producing the guns and pointing them at their heads, and then we had to whisper, which we were concerned might undermine the effectiveness of the threat that we were trying to achieve. But we produced the guns and we said, get down on the ground. I then cocked the weapon that I had to let them know, because they're familiar with weapons, that the weapon was real and that it was ready to fire. They then moved off their seats and got on the floor.
Story would then move to a pivotal position within the circle.
Everything had to be done by line of sight. When I went out the door, Jerry Kelly could see me, Bick McFarlane could see him, the 2 lads who were talking across the circle could see me, and when they went down the wings to arrest their screw, the lads in the wings could see them.
It was like the pebble in the water. It was like a ripple effect of a pebble in the water.
And the circle's gone out in opposite direction, but at exactly the same time, and we were trying to get that effect.
So it was just that bang, 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 all second after second. As soon as I see you taking him, I take this guy here.
Key to the success of the plan was taking over the control room, which oversaw the block and communicated with the outside world.
The problem with the control room was that where he sat, you had an intercom, there was a panic button, there was a radio, and there was a telephone, right? So he had all of those, which were within his reach. So it was crucial that he didn't make a move, and he was actually the person we were most worried about. He was the person we did not want in the control room. And the problem was there was a gate between me and him. He said, don't have to move. Get on the ground. This is an IRA operation. If you move, I'll shoot. If you do what I tell, you won't be hurt. He says, if anybody phones here, you ask them what the problem is, you then take 30 seconds, and whatever the problem is, you go back to them and say, look, that's been sorted. And he says, well, what if they don't believe me? And I says, John, you make them believe you. Your life depends on it.
But there was one room in the block that was a blind spot to the men who hoped to escape from the maze that day.
We thought we had it settled when somebody came out of the ladies' toilets.
As this was happening, John Adams obviously seen his moment, and he reached out and closed the opaque door.
As the other prison officer was being overpowered, John Adams tried to raise the alarm. Kelly fired 2 shots, one of which hit Adams above the eye.
He was unconscious for, I'd say, about 30 seconds. And he woke up, and I had quite an extraordinary conversation with him around saying something like, "What did you do that for?" And he said, I don't know. I'm sorry, I just don't know why I did it. He says, "Can you get up?" And I said to him, "No, you can't." I says, "Now you're bleeding heavily. I will get you some help, but don't move from where you are." However, there was 2 shots fired, and the worry is that this is heard down at the front gate. I'm thinking about the thing could go entirely out of hand.
The gunshots were not heard. The prisoners had secured H7 by the skin of their teeth, but this hitch lost them valuable time that would cost them dearly later.
All screws that were arrested were then brought out of their points of wherever they were and brought into a classroom, and all tied, hands tied behind their backs and tied to each other so that they couldn't go anywhere. And pillowcases were put over their heads to stop them identifying anybody. We took the uniforms off the ones that had been identified, and our lads were getting dressed in uniforms. There was a statement read out in each of the canteens. It's an IRA statement that this was an IRA operation. The IRA had taken over the block.
We're not here for revenge. We're not here to punish us over what has happened over the hunger strike or the protest. But you need to know that if you interfere with the escape, you will be dealt with swiftly and immediately.
At that particular point, the block has been taken over. We control it. We're controlling communications in and out of the block.
Everybody then was readied for the next phase of the operation, which was the arrival of the food lorry.
We needed the lorry driver to drive us out of the block. There was a prison officer drove it. None of us could drive it out. He needed to be identified, come through the gates and stuff like that, and we needed to come up with a plan that would ensure that he would do it.
This guy was crucial to the escape. Davy McLaughlin was the key pin.
So when he got out of the lorry, Jerry Kelly and I went up to him, produced firearms, very aggressively pointed them at him, told him that the block was under Republican control, that he was under arrest, that if he didn't do what he was told, that he would be shot.
This is us here at H7. Okay.
We made the medical room up like 3 pin boards with maps on it. We had rounds of ammunition sitting on the table and a couple of firearms, just in order that he's seen that he was in an environment that we were absolutely confident in, that we would be clinical about, and that we controlled. The driver assured us that we had his full compliance, and we then started showing him the maps, and he actually started showing us small inaccuracies on the maps. And the reason for that was because he said, "I'm just showing you this in case where you're saying you turn left there, it's actually maybe 40 yards further down, but in case you think I'm driving on and doing something wrong, I don't want you to overreact on me." We then loaded up the lorry with escapees, and there was to be 38 prisoners in all. Jerry Kelly was the only prisoner that did not get into the back of the lorry. His job was to lie across the well of the lorry, below the legs of the driver.
That I would have a gun to his stomach, that if he went off, if he did anything wrong, if he did anything against what I said, then he would be shot.
What we were trying to say to him was that no matter what, we're going to escape, but in one of the plans, which is the preferred plan, you live.
Last two on was me and Bobby. Kelly was already in the front, and we closed up the tailboard and pulled down the shutter at the back, and everybody was sitting, we're told, total and absolute silence. So we drove off out of the block, swung left and then left again up along the road towards the exit route.
There were just 3 gates between them and freedom, but their greatest hurdle lay ahead, taking the tally lodge, the control room for the main gate.
I knew the route. even though I was lying down, you could see out, and I knew exactly the route down and right down to the Tally Lodge. I knew the gates we had to go through.
You could hear the guy down at the gate shouting up to the driver, "All right, Davy, how's it going?" And he had the gate, the hydraulic opened, and we drove straight through.
We went through the second gate, which is the administration gate, and then we drove down to the Tally Lodge area.
The Tally Lodge was where the prison officers clocked in and out. The plan was to take it over, restrain the guards, and open the gate. The truck would then take the 38 escapees to Scarva, 20 miles away, where they would be met by the South Armagh IRA and taken across the border.
On one side you had the security hut or Tally Lodge. There was a brick post up in the corner sitting above you, and what I wanted to do was to park the lorry so that we could block as much of what was happening on Tally Lodge from the Brit. My job then was just to sit there and watch David McLaughlin, and I was trying to keep him calm, but in certain ways he was trying to keep me calm. So I was engaged in a conversation. I says, "How you doing?" He says, "I'm all right." And he says, I says, "You married?" He says, "I am." And I says, "Any kids?" He says, "I have a couple of kids." I says, "How much do you earn?" He says, "Not fucking enough." So I always thought it was quite sharp in the circumstances.
Right, lads. Right, how things? You're under arrest. Dash Republic and Army. Maybe you'll be shot.
We went into the out corridor, into the offices, arrested the screws, put them on the ground.
You on the ground now. Face down, hands out. Now!
At that point, Bick came in and left one of his team at the back door to arrest any screws who would follow in their footsteps. And at that point, we had control of the Tally Lodge.
When we got into the back door of the Tally Lodge, there was a boy standing behind the door with a pistol. And he said, "Get in there." And I didn't know what to make of it. And the last thing I thought of was the Provost. Never thought you'd get down there. I seen a prisoner I recognised and said to Keith, "Keep quiet, this is a Provost." And then my heart started, and I thought it was going to bust out of my chest.
A phone call came through to the Tally Lodge.
And I went right quiet, silence. Shh, total silence. Nobody say a word.
You, get up here now.
And we brought the senior officer, we brought him over to the phone. And two of us, one on each side of him, both armed, pistols at his side, told him to answer the phone. And if he said a wrong word, he wouldn't be able to say another word, because the wrong word would be the last word that he said.
Hello?
And the phone call was from the emergency control room to say that an alarm had been triggered in the Tally Lodge.
And we could hear this, you see. And your man said, no. And we were sort of pushing him, like, you know. And he says, what alarm are you talking about?
The emergency control room said, the alarm that has went off is an alarm that's on to the TV. Which, when we looked over at the TV, there was a number of prison officers, prison staff, lying under the TV, and obviously one of them had hit the alarm. And they all began moving away from the TV as a result of our taking a focus on it.
And your man said to him on the phone, "Red, come on, stop calling about now, no more messing around." And your man said, "Aye, all right. He said, "Well, reset the alarm." And then this was this guy's opportunity to send the signal. And he asked the guy on the other end of the phone in the emergency control room, he asked him, "How do you reset the alarm?" Everybody knows. We know how to reset alarms when we're prisoners, you know. Everybody knows. And see, the minute he said it, the two of us just pushed the pistols into the side of his head. And we were listening very, very intently. And the guy on the other end of the phone says, "Push it back in, you stupid bee," and put the phone down. And this guy drained, just physically turned white, you know, the same colour as his shirt, because he tried to send a signal that something was wrong, and the other guy didn't pick it up. We had actually hit this place probably about 20 minutes later, 15, 20 minutes later than we should have, which coincided with the change of duty on and off at that period. That was causing us problems because screws were coming off duty, screws were coming on duty.
It was very quickly that we had in the region of 24 prison staff arrested in the Tally Lodge area under gunpoint, and the numbers were mounting. Our lads were standing in what we would always describe now as like a sea of screws. They were just surrounded by screws in under their legs everywhere.
I could see these boys, and to me, although they were in control of the Tally Lodge, they weren't in overall control of the whole situation. And this boy was saying to me, and I said to him that I think we could take them. I said, I think we could take these boys here. And I don't know why he overheard what I said or why he just seen me speaking to somebody, but I was told in no uncertain terms to keep my mouth shut. He says to me, are you a hero? You're a fucking dead hero. And he pointed a gun at me.
The prisoners had exploited the jail's weakest link, the prison officers. But the staff's anger and humiliation unleashed an unexpected strength.
It's unexpected. I will never know what happened. It just all pandemonium broke loose. I don't know who threw the first blow. I don't know what happened. Just everything was pandemonium and scuffling everywhere around me.
I ran out and shouted at the back, "That's it, go everybody, go."
So I went down to open the gate, got the gate the whole way back, ran back in towards Bobby. See, when I did that, they drove 2 cars in and blocked the exit of the lorry. So the lorry wasn't going anywhere. So Bobby then said to me, "Open it, let the lads out."
I remember then, I looked to my right and they were jumping out of the back of the food lorry, and I thought they were never going to stop jumping.
There was a fight in this little open area, and there was a Brit in a box, sentry box, on top of the hydraulic gate to the right of it, literally 10 yards away. And he saw the fight. He saw half a dozen of us battering lumps out of each other down at this gate, but everybody's in uniforms. He didn't see any guns, he didn't see any weapons.
The escape descended into a fight between prisoners and staff. 5 officers were stabbed.
I seen Jimmy first, and Jimmy's words were to me, he says, "Campbell, the bastards have stabbed me." And I said, "Where?" And I think it was his left arm he lifted, and it was just below his armpit. But I said to him, "Jimmy, you're going to be okay because there's not much blood," and there wasn't really an awful lot of blood.
It transpired in later years when there was a court case about the whole escape that this Brit gave evidence, says he thought it was a melee between prison staff who were fighting each other.
Come on, keep going.
35 of us at that point ran for the fence, and 3 of us turned to hold the screws back with our pistols whilst everybody climbed over the fence.
Right back, left hand.
So we're going after these boys over the field, and one of them turned around and pointed a gun at me, and I thought it was a replica, and I kept running on him, and that's where he shot me. He shot me in the leg, and well, I went down, that was me out of it then.
It was every man for himself. McFarlane, Kelly and Story quickly assembled 3 separate teams.
We got up into this house and hijacked 2 cars and a van and headed off in different directions. Seamus McElwain was with me, and he says, "Look, there's no point in staying on major roads because there'll be helicopters up, there'll be roadblocks, they'll have different things on major roads." He says, "You need to get off and get rid of this. After us just hijacking it, you need to get rid of this," he says. And he was the only one in that car of 8 people in the car. He was the only one from the countryside. Everybody else was either town or city, and had no sort of field craft as such. But he knew, countryside's different. You need to lose all sense of visibility that anybody has of you, become part of the countryside, so get rid of the machinery. We spotted this house and drove up this roadway, I dropped everybody off, give them, whoever was getting into the house, give one of the lads a pistol. I just get in and take over the house. And the beauty about this house was, you're looking at the doorway on the way in, and to the right was a doorway of like a built-in garage. So to all intents and purposes, from aerial view or peelers driving past, to look in to see the car that belongs to the house, and the mark disappeared from the face of the earth.
We crossed a couple of fields, crossed the road, and we were coming to a river. It was actually the Lagan. We then hid along a hedge and got into the water and hid onto the bank. There was a couple of cows in a field facing us, and they started running off. One of them was startled. We thought people were coming, and they did. It was RUC, military police, and prison staff. They were shouting about prisoners having been seen. One of the RUC men, he pointed over to where we were and said, look at the way the water ripples on the bank there. Do you think that's odd and stuff like that? And then he finally handed over his rifle to another RUC man, got down into, if you like, a press-up position for a look under the lip, and he was able to see clearly our heads behind the reeds. We were just clear to be seen. They took us out of the river. This was all under gunpoint, and then they stripped us naked and marched us up to a jeep, and then they brought us back round to the jail. They dragged us out by the feet from the van, dragged us in, kicked us into the punishment cells.
Jerry Kelly and his team made it to a nationalist housing estate in Lurgan, where they made contact with a former H-Block comrade.
My memory of it is that Match of the Day was on. He was sitting there watching it, and I shouted he had a nickname, I shouted his nickname. And he, I mean, literally lifted about sort of whatever 6 inches off the sofa. And I says, "It's Jerry Kelly, take it easy." I says, "We've just escaped from the H-Blocks." He says, "What? And then he sort of started recognising me. And he was sort of trying to get the information. He says, "When? How many? It hasn't been on the news." And I says, "We've just escaped." I says, "Well, we're seen coming in here." I says, "We stopped at the shop." I says, "You need to get the OC." I says, "And we need to be out of this district in 5 minutes."
Mass escape from the maze. A prison officer killed, more than 20 Republicans on the run.
Maintenant, en Irlande du Nord, une vingtaine de prisonniers se sont échappés de la prison de haute sécurité.
The fields and hedgerows around the jail have been bristling with heavily armed soldiers, while helicopters have been circling overhead.
It must have been the following day when people came down to visit me. They told me Jimmy had died. I found it hard to believe, because I seen the blood on his shirt, and to me it was only a spot about the size of the palm of your hand. There was no great deal of blood, but there you go.
38 prisoners escaped. 10 of them were recaptured by tonight, but the remainder are still at large.
Any way you look at it, the escape from the H-Block has driven an astonishing battering ram through one of the most carefully constructed high-security prisons in the world.
It is a very grave incident indeed, the most serious in our prison history. The Secretary of State, Jim Pryor, has set up an inquiry immediately, and I think we must await the result of that inquiry. In the meantime, everything is being done to try to find the escaped prisoners and return them to prison.
When they threw me into the cell, it was over the next 5 to 10 minutes that the feeling was coming over me. It must have been, I don't know, euphoria, relief, or whatever, that we had actually done it, that we had busted the jail, busted it wide open, so-called famous H-Blocks, most secure prison in Western Europe, blah, blah. A Thatcher's dream, horror sort of breaker's yard. That I was full of adrenaline, euphoria, relief, feeling absolutely successful in everything that we had tried to do that day. And I can honestly say that my personal circumstances did not permeate through to me in any way that I can remember.
You've taken over a house with a husband and wife and 3 kids, 2 lads at about 11 and 12, and a baby at about 9 months. We just said, look, if we can secure a promise from them not to go to the peelers for 24 hours, we'll take it at that. That'll give us a head start. So I said, how are you going to do that? So I said, well, I'm going to talk to the woman. So I actually said, here, look, I'm left with 2 choices here. One is, we're going to leave here as quickly as possible, as soon as possible, and be out of your lives. And I says, and the only way that I can guarantee that you don't lift that phone is that I take the eldest one of your kids so far down the line with us and release him. And the woman was just horrified by this prospect. And she says, you wouldn't do it, I wouldn't do it. And I says, well, the second choice is that you, as a Christian, will give me your word that you will not contact the authorities. So they gave a promise, and she says, you can tell your boss that just to prove it to him, if he's a man of his word, we're people of our word, and we're prepared to get the good book out and swear on the good book that we'll keep our word. So they got all the family to put their hands on the Bible and swear that they wouldn't divulge anything for the period that they had agreed to. 72 hours. She agreed to 72 hours.
The OC who I knew I had been in jail with had arrived. He says, I can put you in an oil dump, an arms dump. He says, it hasn't been used for years. It's on the floorboards of a house. And we said, well, if it's a dump, it's never been found, and they've been raiding lurking for whatever number of years we were doing it, it sounded the best option. But when we would get down, the surprise was, you know, we were expecting a dump to be, you'd be able to sit up on it or something. You weren't able to sit up. It was actually under 2 rooms with a connection in. You couldn't actually turn, if you were lying down, so you could only lie down, and you couldn't actually turn without hitting your shoulder on the rafters. So it was fairly tight. So we said to the couple over there, we'll just stay there, unless, as the children would say, you had to do number 2s, unless you couldn't afford. But I mean, if you're in it or whatever, we got coffee jars and all sorts of stuff down to say that that's the best way to do it. We spoke in whispers. Anytime we had to speak anyway. We got a radio down with an earpiece to try and hear the news, so we were hearing straight away what was happening in this, because it was obviously headline news and all of that. And of course, if you aren't up getting, you know, showered every day and what have you, then after a while, because we were there for 2 weeks, after a while you start to smell, and you know, we might have been used to smell, but we knew clearly that there was body odours and all of that. A representative of the Northern Command came to see us and sort of discussed how we were doing all of that. And I was dizzy when I went up. I went up to talk to him, and I was actually dizzy. My balance was gone when I went up. So it was that type of atmosphere.
Well, let's keep it going.
We decided that we would go to South Armagh because we knew contact people down there that we could get in contact with. We also decided that we would go only at night and travel through fields for the first few hours, as opposed to using any country lanes or roads. Once it got past midnight, we used railway tracks the whole way down towards Newry. So I just remember waking up, sitting dozing on the Monday morning at about 7 o'clock. We'd taken a small radio as well with us and listening to the news at 7 o'clock in the morning, very, very faint. And just this feeling of birds chirping around you, and you're sitting in the middle of a field, whereas the day before you were in Europe's most secure prison camp. It's actually an unreal type of feeling, you know. It's a wonder. I'm here, I'm out. You know, is this real? This is amazing. It's quiet, it's peaceful. You can hear the wind blowing through the trees. come about 8 o'clock that night, we headed off again. Same thing again, over fields, fences. Now people were getting tired, and because you'd walk all night you'd set off about 8 or half 8 at night, and you'd walk, you know, as continuously as possible, right through to about 4 or 5 o'clock the next morning. So we did that for 3 or 4 days.
McFarlane decided to take a risk. Knowing they were in a nationalist area, they threw themselves on the mercy of the family in whose barn they were hiding.
Just took a chance and got them to go to a local Republican in the area that they knew. 2 big cars came out to pick us up. Once they put us into the cars, that was us driven straight into South Armagh and into safe billets right down, literally 200 to 300 yards off the border. There was this feeling of, like, you know, you'd closed a chapter. That when they arrived to pick us up, there was a confidence about them. They were in their territory. They were in South Armagh. The minute that I got into the car with these people, I relaxed totally and absolutely, and I just felt that is it. This phase of the escape is done. We are now in safe hands.
After months living undercover in rural Ireland, Kelly and McFarlane flew to the continent in January 1984 using false passports. Here they resumed their IRA activities with new identities.
In jail, the outside world is probably in its true sense of the word fantastic, because your memory of it is exaggerated. What it came home to me was I was actually out walking one day and had to stop at the lights and press the button. When I was walking across the street, it just hit me. You know, just one of those things. I just remember it very well. You know, flip me, I'm out. You know, I'm free. And it was as mundane as that. It wasn't anything extraordinary that happened.
Life over there is different because you do have a false identity. You become somebody else. You're a face that nobody knows. So you are able to go and walk the city streets of Amsterdam or anywhere, any of the major cities in Europe, bar of course England. You're able to go and live anonymously.
Being on the run, I mean, it can be a very lonely place. You're in Paris. Paris is whatever, 10 million people in it. You do not have friendships, you know, so you're like in the middle of a sea of people but without relationship. You could have decided that you were going to make a life and decided to pull away from the struggle and decided to go and get a job and do all of that. But that was not my decision. My decision was to remain with the struggle. I had made some decisions which were impacting on very many lives, not just my own.
You can have a normal life, with the exception is you're always watching over your shoulder for the wee odd glitch that might happen or something isn't right. And you obviously have a set of procedures, you know, security procedures that you adhere to religiously every day.
A car accident was enough to put us back in jail. And you have to realise that's the atmosphere you're in. So once they start doing any check, you're gone.
Kelly and McFarlane remained Britain's most wanted. The escape had been a propaganda coup for the IRA and a personal affront to Margaret Thatcher.
When the Dutch security people came on top of us, it's hard to say as to how they came about it.
We called it wrong, basically, because the next morning they were onto the apartment. They had got onto the apartment somewhere.
But in the heels of the hunt, it was 5 o'clock in the morning when the windows came in, the stun grenades, the flash grenades, and the armed security people from the Dutch police were just in on top of you, through windows and everything.
They come in basically like an SAS squad, and the next thing I know, this guy had a machine pistol in my mouth. And he was shouting at me, and what came through to my consciousness, because I thought it was gone. I actually thought it was a bomb, you say, it was the first thing, and then I realised it was okay, and then these guys were gone. And he was shouting in Dutch, And that's what came through to me. And it was actually, when I heard him shouting in Dutch, it was actually a relief.
It's a frightening experience, and the thing I'm thinking of is, you know, if that was the Peelers or the Brits or something coming on top of you, you'd be dead before you know it. The extradition process ran to the end of it, and I think it was the 4th or the 5th of December 1986. They flew us back in and then brought back up into the hitch blocks. And they brought me into H7, and they brought me onto the same wing that I had escaped from. And they actually had the SO of the block that we arrested on the day of the escape standing in the circle when I walked in. He was the guy who was in charge of the block that day we escaped, to welcome me back in and assign me down to the wing that I was going into.
They thought that the thing do. It was like something out of one of these detective shows, you know, bring them back to where it started so they'll never do it again.
The plan was that if he did not return within 10 minutes to tell us that there was a problem, then we knew the escape was on. At the same time as Spick went into the circle, Republican prisoners in each of the 4 wings began preparing to arrest the screws who were in their particular wing. The next part of the operation then was that Vic McFarlane would go into the circle area, walk over to a grill here, and actually shout down to these wings, has anybody got the bumper? The bumper was included.
And I call the Junior Minister, Mr. Jerry Kelly.
I beg to move that the second stage of the Public Authorities Reform Bill be agreed. Concordia, the bill contains provisions relating to certain public bodies which are the responsibility of a number of departments, but it has been